So the question is Canadian real estate screwed? And the answer is, as home sales post their worst start since 2009, sales are down 37.9%, while prices are down 18.3%. And that equates to a $137,000 difference in prices since last year. And on top of all that, a billion-dollar real estate developer just rattled the Vancouver real estate market by going insolvent, which isn't helping the fact that housing starts in Canada have slowed by 13% as we've seen increased demand, which has led to a 24% increase in rents. So in other words, it isn't just unaffordable for variable rate mortgage holders anymore. Canadian real estate is now becoming unaffordable for everybody, including those who aren't even looking to own. But before we get into the details, my name is Noel Mathias, and if you want to thrive financially, this is the place for you. So go ahead, click that subscribe button and hit that like button so more people like you can see this video. Okay, so the last couple of weeks have been really bad for Canadian real estate. But before we get into the actual stats of what's going on in the Canadian real estate market, I think it's important to discuss two big topics that have come about in the last couple of weeks. The first is the devastating insolvency of a Vancouver real estate developer that for a lot of people in the industry was not unexpected. So let's jump you into the news and show you exactly what happened here. This is the headline from the Globe and Mail: Developer insolvency rattles Vancouver real estate industry. And the developer in question here is a company called Coromandel Properties. So what makes this developer significant is the fact that they're a billion-dollar company and they have over $700 million in mortgages. And recently they've had to offload properties in order to create cash flow events. And what that basically means is that they were no longer able to make their payments, and subsequently they had to sell some of their holdings in order to be able to continue to make their payments. And eventually when the money runs out, they find themselves in a situation like they're in now, which is insolvency. And basically what that means is they don't have enough money coming in to pay their debt obligations. Now, typically what would happen with a developer is they would buy property, they would have it rezoned by the municipalities, and then they would develop it into something that has a higher value, like an apartment building or maybe single family homes, and the sales of those properties would allow them to pay off their mortgages. But in this case, Coromandel Properties was unable to do that. And they're largely blaming municipalities and the red tape associated with getting those properties rezoned for the inability to survive. Now, that being said, according to the Globe and Mail article, this is a company that is known for paying above market value in order to obtain properties that they plan on redeveloping. And obviously, if you can't get a municipality on side to do what you want to do with the property, well, you're going to run into a problem, especially if this is a slow process. So while this is scary, this should also be a lesson for real estate investors who are maybe a little bit smaller, maybe people who own 1 or 2 residential properties like you and me who are watching this channel. And that's that if you buy too much property too fast, especially in a market that is chaotic where prices are going up very quickly, well, you can find yourself behind the 8 ball pretty fast when the market turns. And clearly the guys who are running this company bought too much property too fast, weren't able to get it rezoned, and that's why they're finding themselves in some financial difficulty. And what's really scary about this for Canadians is that every single time one of these developers goes insolvent and isn't able to develop the properties to the plans that they've had, that means that there's going to be less future properties available, which is going to continue to lead to unaffordability both in the rental market and in the resale market alike. Now, that being said, there's definitely considerable problems in the rental market right now. Vacancy levels are at some of the lowest rates that they've been in history, and one large landlord is reporting that they have had record rent turnovers in Q4 of 2022. Now, what does this mean? Record rent turnover is basically when an organization is able to turn over properties and increase the rents. In this case, they were able to increase rents by 24.3% on the properties that turned over. So in other words, one renter decided to leave, another one came in, and the difference between what the old renters were paying and the new renters were paying is a 24% difference. Now, in some provinces like BC and Ontario where there are rent controls, typically the only way a landlord is able to increase rents when the market is going up is when there's a turnover from one renter to the other, because there are rules in place in certain provinces that prevent landlords from being able to increase rents past a certain point, which is especially problematic in times like this, where landlords are having increased costs due to variable rate mortgages, adjustable rate mortgages, and higher overall costs on everything, but they aren't able to pass those costs on to their existing renters, which means existing renters are essentially getting a free pass while everybody else is paying a significantly higher rate for housing. And this will become even more problematic as we start to see the vacancy rates continue to go down. This is due to a lack of building and higher demand from increased numbers of immigrants coming into the country, as well as people who are leaving their parents' homes and jumping into the real world of living on their own. And as you can see from a recent report by CMHC, vacancy rates for both purpose-built rental markets and condominium apartment markets are below 2%, which I have never seen in my 20 years in this business. And to top this all off, rents are increasing by 18% for new renters. So where we're seeing housing prices decline, which I'll get to in a second, we're seeing rental rates increase quite substantially. And this is because higher interest rates don't just affect those who own a home or people who are buying a home, but also the people who are looking to live in a home that is owned by somebody else. Now, on top of all this, CREA, the Canadian Real Estate Association, is reporting that the real estate market in January had its worst start since 2009. Now, keep in mind, 2009 was post-financial crisis, which means things were really, really bad at that point in time. And it appears that Canadian real estate is right back to where we were back in 2009 with respect to the number of sales and reductions in prices. And according to CREA, real estate sales are down 37.1%, and average prices are down 18.3% since January of last year. Now that represents $137,000 difference in prices for the average Canadian. Now, the key thing to remember here is that even though the housing market is down 18.3% and $137,000 on average, you have to remember that average is a relative term. So in other words, there are certain markets in Canada that are down significantly more than 18%, and there are certain markets that are still faring fairly well. And one commenter on this channel recently pointed out that housing prices were down 20% no matter where you were, and that's just simply not the case. In markets that did not experience the same irrational exuberance as, say, Vancouver or Toronto, housing prices have actually been pretty normal, even though we've seen a significant increase in interest rates. In fact, in places like Calgary, we're still seeing competing offers and a very healthy, well-functioning market, even though interest rates are up quite substantially. And this is largely due to the fact that a lot of people are leaving places like Vancouver and Ontario and moving to places like Alberta where housing is more affordable, which is propping up those markets. So the question is Canadian real estate screwed? And the answer is, kind of. Certain markets are definitely feeling significantly more pain. And I feel for the people who bought in really, really crazy markets in the last 2 years, got variable or adjustable rate mortgages, and now are faced with a higher interest rate and a lower property value. However, there is some light at the end of the tunnel here with respect to Canadian real estate and how much prices are going to drop. Now, CREA is predicting that the market will turn around by the end of 2023. I'm not so sure that that's actually going to be the case, but that doesn't mean that there isn't at least some support for the Canadian real estate market. And if you take a look at the most recent CMHC housing start data, well, housing starts are down 13% in January, which means there's less supply, which means with more demand from people coming from other countries, that there is some balance to the market, even with rates being where they are at. So what that means is that if you're a homeowner, it could very well be that the worst has already passed. Now, there could also be significant defaults. There could be other things that play out in this whole scenario. But assuming that there isn't any really bad news really soon, it seems like we've maybe found a new normal in the real estate market. And again, that's largely due to low inventory and the fact that even though there's less buyers out there, there's less people who are also willing to sell. Now, from the perspective of somebody who's looking to get into the market, unfortunately what that means is that there probably isn't going to be more affordable housing coming to the market anytime soon. Where we're at right now is probably where we're going to be at. So if it's the right timing for you to buy, I wouldn't be holding out hoping that the market's going to fall, because it could very well go the other way. And you have to keep in mind that while you're trying to save $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, at the end of 25 years, that $5,000, $10,000 or $15,000 that you save by waiting or don't save by waiting, at the end of the day, is just going to be a blip on the radar down the road. The main difference being, if you wait to get into the market, you're probably going to find yourself taking longer to pay the mortgage off. So I've said it before on this channel, the right time to get in the market is the time when you can purchase a property with complete confidence that you can afford that property and you will continue to be able to afford that property for the long term. Now, there's also some really good reasons not to buy real estate. I covered that in another video. I'm going to link to that right here.